It's the Eagle Community Television Forum with your host, Gary Shorman.
Hi, I'm Gary Shorman, and this is the Forum on Eagle Television. It's great having you along with us on the program. It's brought to you by Hayes Med. Our guest today is Dalton Steinert, and Dalton has been playing a special role at Fort Hays State University as a senior. Before we talk about something special he's done, Dalton, tell me a little bit. You're a senior at Fort Hays State. What's your major?
My major is accounting.
And why accounting?
So when I was growing up, I always liked numbers and doing math and stuff. I would always help students with my classmates with their math and stuff. And I thought about professions that use math and stuff. And I realized that teachers don't really make a lot of money, and I wanted to make some money. And so I thought accounting, it's what my mom does. I grew up around accounting and everything. So I took a couple of accounting classes in high school and realized
I
like this. Yeah, I like this. It's pretty
fun.
So
you're a senior at Fort Hays State, and so you're going through that process. Somewhere along the line, now you are a millennial, just from your age definition of where you're, I think that's what, 82 through 2002, is that a millennial?
Yeah, for the most part. Yep.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. And so you fall into that category. But somewhere along the line, you got hooked up with the National Millennial Community.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
So the National Millennial Community is a group of students, I want to say, we're all over the United States, actually in different parts of the world too, a couple different countries. And basically we just group together and talk about millennials to big corporations. A lot of times people have big misconceptions about our generation and how they should pitch job opportunities to us, and also how we can help their companies grow, how they can help us. And we really try to clear up a lot of miscommunications and stereotypes that come with our generation.
Well, that's one of the things I know that you talk about in the workforce in general, but then you also talk about some of the history and what students or people that are in that category, what they've seen versus others in the history. You go the baby boomers, which are now the older part of our society and what they do. So you talk about that and the difference between millennials, and I think there's a new group coming up even below that as well. You mentioned national companies. When you say big national companies, what do you mean? I mean,
we're talking companies that are consistently in the Fortune 500. I mean, we're talking like Amazon, Microsoft, Google. We've talked
Starbucks.
To Starbucks. Yeah, we talked to Starbucks. We've talked to Boeing, GP, Universal Studios. I mean, when we say national companies, we're talking about companies that, when you think of big corporations, you think of these companies automatically. They're consistently in the top 500.
Now, when you say you talk to them, what does that mean?
So, with the community, most of the times the conversations we have are from online communications. Sometimes the event that I went to in Seattle, we about a couple times a year get together in a big summit and visit corporations in the city that we're going to. But most of the time we have semi-monthly meetings with these executives. We usually are talking to VPs of finance or CEOs, CFOs. Sometimes
human resources, probably.
Human resources too. Yeah, we talk to a lot of human resources, like VPs of marketing and management and everything. Conversation, video chats, live chats, sometimes with Skype, sometimes with just instant messaging on Facebook and everything.
Now, you said there were thousands that are involved with this national community, millennial community, but there was about 30 people that attended.
Yeah.
Where did these 30 people that descended on Seattle, where'd they come from? And what were they like?
Oh, goodness. I mean, because when I went to the event, I was relatively new to the organization, so I didn't really know a lot of people that were going.
Is it an organization or cause? You almost said cause, I think there. I mean,
it's a group of people. I want to say more of it's a cause, because we're just trying to, do good for the millennials and do good for these companies that are just have misconceptions about our generation. But we're talking people from Hawaii, Alaska. There was a couple of kids from North Carolina, Texas. The guy that I shared a hotel room was from Montana. So we're talking all over the United States.
Now, are millennials from Kansas, like yourself, different than those from Hawaii or South Carolina, North Carolina?
Yeah, I was actually
that's hard too, because some of it is very regional in nature.
So I was actually talking to one of the people from the community about that, just she was, I want to say, like towards the older side of the millennial generation, and she said that a lot of times the issues that we talk about don't really fit with her, that she doesn't really fit into the problem that we have or the stereotype that we have, because she felt that in North Carolina it's a lot different environment than it is in Seattle where we were at, or like the Midwest where I'm from, like Kansas and everything. So I think with how widespread we are, there's just a bunch of different experiences that people have and that they can bring to the table in regards to what companies are looking for or what we can bring to other companies.
You mentioned the word stereotype. What is a stereotypical millennial? If you were to just say 3 or 4 adjectives that go along with millennial, what would they be?
Oh, Lord.
What would they be from, say, the business perspective?
Okay.
And then from maybe your perspective. So from the business world, the big companies like Starbucks and Amazon, what do they see the millennials as or as being?
So most of the time when you're going to ask about millennials, you're going to think lazy, unmotivated, privileged, that they've had everything handed to them. That's from both my perspective and then also like big companies. I do want to say, like, I don't believe in like the stereotypes of millennials, just because.
But that's what you're hearing from.
That's what that. Yeah. When we ask a bunch of these companies, like, what are the big misconceptions you have about our generation, or like, what do you generalize about us? Consistently, that's what they're always saying. Like, we're lazy, we're not motivated, we're not as professional. We're always in our phones using technology, and we're awkward in conversation because we don't, in like face-to-face conversation, because we just hide behind screens. I don't really believe that much.
So what do you, when you get together, what do you try to tell these companies on the other side? Because you're talking about, here's what we're really trying to do. Here's why we're different. Here's why we see maybe some other generations have kind of missed the boat, but we can do it here. What do you tell them?
We basically just tell them that you can't generalize like a specific generation, because a lot of the problems, or like stereotypes, I guess you can call them, that they send to us have been sent to almost every single generation. I mean, my parents and the generation before me, I mean, they were like supposed to be the hippies and like into rock and roll, and they were just going to waste their lives with rock and roll music. But I mean, you can see that they didn't do that. Like that generation's doing pretty well right now. And then when you have like baby boomers and everything, like they just came into the world and were really fast, and they boomed and they did a lot of good things. But when you look at us, like, we just try to tell people that you can't just stereotype millennials, and because we're the first generation that has really been analyzed with all the specific like data we have now and like the data analytic tools and everything, we're the first generation that's ever been analyzed so critically when we're still the rising generation. So
what do you like when you're talking to these companies and they're asking these questions? What do you see that they need to do differently? The big companies, do they need to ask different questions? Do they need to have different job requirements, or what do you see them? Because it's interesting, we do this in our company. I've done a couple panels where we talk about how everybody has to work together, and getting somebody from, the baby boomer on down through the millennials, and then even some of the newer ones that are out there. And it's saying, how do you incorporate them into one workforce? And that is the real challenge, because everybody at the end has to work together. What are you asking the companies? How do you ask companies to be better about this?
So one of the most common answers to the questions that we usually are asked is, we always say that you have to have an open mind and you have to be open to change, because a lot of the companies that we're talking to, the CEOs are older, from a different generation than the millennials, or sometimes even the previous generation before us. And we just have to constantly tell them, you have to be open to change. You have to be willing to change your environment, take risks, incorporate change, and just have an open and progressive mindset, because you're having people in the workforce now who are so much variety. There's a much bigger variety of people going into the workforce now than there ever has been. So you have to just have a company that's willing to take a stance on like change, and saying, we won't be set in our ways, and we'll be open to any and all like risk or shaking up the business.
One of the things you mentioned was, work ethics and doing that. you know, you come from Otis, rural area,
Yeah.
everybody's hardworking,
Yeah.
pile on, work longer, work harder, sweat more kind of thing.
Right.
How does that compare to the millennial world, where maybe people have not done that? They've only been a part of the computer world. They've never done a labor type of job where you went out and had to even things like mow the lawn or
Right.
dig ditches kind of deal versus sit and play a video game all day.
Right.
How does that affect the, I guess, the overview or the work ethic? How do you tell that story?
So one of the easiest ways to tell the story is just because you're doing work on a computer versus doing work like manual labor, like a construction worker, that's an easy comparison. So it's easy to see the improvements and the progress of the work for a construction worker, because if you're building a house, you can physically see the change. But if you're doing work on a computer, it's hard to conceptualize what you're doing because you don't see really, or nobody else outside of what you're doing is able to see the improvements of the process that you're making, but it's still work. And so I think it's just hitting the nail on the head. Like, just because we use technology and we understand how, like, we've grown up with technology, whereas like some of the CEOs of these companies had to learn how to use computers, whereas it was just something that we grew up with it. So I mean, we didn't really have to learn, we learned with it, but they had to change from like hand writing everything, handwriting checks, handwriting, doing their books and everything to everything electronic, yeah. And so it's easy to see all of that manual labor when you're doing it by hand compared to doing it on a computer, but it's still work and you're still putting in long hours. When I did my internship at Coke this summer, I was working hard. Like, I thought I was one of those construction workers building like the Empire State Building.
You were sweating at your keyboard.
Right, I mean, I was putting in 10, 12-hour days consistently, and I think that shows that like millennials are capable of working hard if you just tell us what you want done. We don't like to be told what to do, but if you say, it'd be good if you worked on this, or here's a couple of things that you want to, or we want you to work on or want to improve, we'll do that. We don't want to be babied along the way. We just want to see the progress and know that we're going to make a change in the end.
We're going to take a break here, Dalton, and come back and want to find out maybe how some of the generations are the same, what you found too, because you go over there, some things are a lot more the same maybe than they are different. Maybe the approach to them or the tools being used are different, but maybe there's some things. We'll talk about that when we come back. Dalton Steinert is our guest, just attended the National Millennial Community Convention out in Seattle. Back with more after this from Hayes Med.
Hayes Med is your first and best choice for healthcare. They're the only facility providing tertiary level services in this region. With more than 70 physicians and 26 specialties ranging from heart, orthopedic, spine care, cancer, obstetrics and gynecology, wound care, rehabilitation and surgery, including the Da Vinci robotic surgery, Hayes Med is your comprehensive health provider for people throughout Western Kansas. Hayes Med, helping people be healthy.
Are you frustrated with Wi-Fi dead zones in your home? It happens when you don't have Boost, the cutting-edge Wi-Fi solution from Eagle Communications. A Boost-certified Eagle technician maps your home, then installs a dual-band modem and router, plus discrete access points to deliver wall-to-wall Wi-Fi with no dead zones. Boost powers all your family's devices in all the places you love to live. Get Boost. Wi-Fi made simple. Only from Eagle Communications. Call today.
Welcome back to the second half of our forum. We're talking about really some interesting things on generational differences, not only in the workplace, but in real life. Our guest is Dalton Steinert. I do want to remind you before we go and kind of wrap up here is that if you have any questions, comments, ideas, maybe solutions to our generational difference, send them to me. I'd be excited to hear them. Gary.Shorman@eaglecom.net. You can also go online on Facebook under ECTV Forum. I'd like to hear from you. Again, our guest is Dalton Steinert. Dalton is a senior at Fort Hays State University, and I say were you recruited into this, or did you find it online, or how did you get attached with the National Millennial Community?
So my advisor is Jessica Hieronymus, and we're really close. Like, we text almost all the time. Like, we're really close and we know each other really well. And so I got an email from her one day, and she was just like, hey, I think this is a really great opportunity. But the way that she worded it was that she already signed me up for it, even though I didn't really know what it was.
It's so great you're in on it.
Yeah, and so I got an email from her and the guy who was running it, heading it, Bill Amata, at the same time, basically. And so I sat back and thought, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on right now. And so I looked into more of what it was, and I saw that it was really impactful, like talking to big businesses and everything about millennials and everything. And I'm really passionate about that, like trying to clear up a lot of stereotypes. And so I said, hey, let's do it. And she said, good, because I already signed you up. And so I was like, okay, awesome, fine, let's do it.
Is this something that's sponsored by the school, Fort Hays State, or is that something you have to kind of raise your own money to participate in?
So the way that I think it works is that some people in the National Millennial Community have student organizations that are like part of the umbrella National Millennial Community. And I think that they raise their own money and do their own fundraisers to go on these trips. But Fort Hays is relatively new. We had a group last year, but they weren't really well known. I didn't even know that it was on campus last year. Mm-hmm. And so we're trying to push it to become a bigger student organization than the 4 people that are involved, me and 3 other students. Mm-hmm. So I think we're trying, but Fort Hays is definitely still testing out the waters when it comes to this.
When you looked at this, you started studying this, we went into the break talking about this. Did you find some things that were, I say the same, or more the same than maybe more different when you started comparing across some of the different generations?
Yeah, so when we talk with a lot of different companies, a lot of times when we're talking to the older CEOs that are from the baby boomer generation, we were asking them some of the misconceptions or stereotypes that they had when it came to their generation. And some of the things that they were saying, like lazy, unmotivated, just gonna listen to rock and roll music all the time, we could kind of see how that kind of played into the stereotypes that fall into the millennial community, or the millennials in general, because when you think about millennials, a lot of times people think technology, gonna live in the basement, playing video games, tweeting everything and all of that, which can be seen as lazy to some people, or what technology is for us could be seen as like rock and roll music for the generation before us. And so I really think that a lot of the stereotypes that people throw around for millennials now have been already thrown around to almost every other generation that we've seen.
It's interesting. When you look at this, if you were to say, and you're hiring somebody in the workforce, what should you look for in millennials that kind of separates? Because I'm guessing there were lazy people in every generation.
Oh, of course.
There were people that weren't very smart in every generation. There were people that really didn't want to work and proceed or do whatever. So what do you ask to sort out a millennial? Because a lot of times it's, there's a lot of social media out there. You can look online and find what people are doing somewhat. Right. But what should the questions be that an employer should ask to millennials to really sort through that, to find out, here's somebody really good that really wants to grow a company like we do as the owners?
So because we're still relatively young compared to some of the other people who are heading these businesses, we might not have as much experience as somebody that's older than us. So I think it's really important to ask what we can bring to the table and what makes us stand out more than somebody else from a different generation. And I think it's also important to look at where they've come from, the classes they've taken, but also like if they've taken internships, because that's a really big that's a really big opportunity that millennials are looking for now, because we know that experience will get us much farther than a grade point average. I mean, you can be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't have experience, the company's probably not going to want you as much as somebody who has experience, who's been exposed to challenge and problem solving and everything. So I think the biggest place where companies might fail and where they can improve is asking millennials like a scenario and how they would fix it. And it's because when you do that, you can really see how millennials think about change, think about improving processes and everything, and how that specific millennial that they're interviewing can play a part in their organization.
Well, it's interesting. It's a great subject, because as we go forward, that generation is moving more and more to the point that in the next few years there's going to be a major chunk of that group that's going to be not only in the workforce but going to be consumers. So where does somebody find out more about the National Millennial Community, because that's an interesting title. It seems pretty generic,
Yeah.
but yet that is a part of a group that's involved. How do they find out more? And if they want to find out more about maybe some of the solutions, the answers, is there a website? Is there a way to find out?
Yeah, so
more?
there is a website. It's just, if you Google National Millennial Community, that's probably the answer everybody gives, is just Google it.
Yeah.
That's the typical millennial answer.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And do it on your phone.
Right,
Don't do it on
right.
a real computer. Do it on your
right.
phone.
But there's a website. That's actually how when I first heard of the opportunity, that's the first thing I went to, is the website, to see if they had a website. And it kind of gives some information on the companies we've talked with, some of the things that the companies have said back from the talks that we've had, and how they're making changes and everything based on the conversations we've had with their employees. So the best place is to probably look at their website. They do have some like About Us sections that really lays out that they're a community that's focused on shaking it up with CEOs and everything.
I'm guessing that your local group, you and the 3 others that
Yep.
are part of the Support HA, would also come out and talk to businesses about that, would you?
Of course, yeah. I mean, that's what even though we do a summit a couple times a year talking to these big businesses, it's always good to see where you can apply what we're talking to big businesses about
regional
to regional areas too, because I mean, when you think business is business. So people can improve anywhere, regardless of the size of their company or how many employees or their revenue or anything. It's really good to have these conversations with anybody, because every business can benefit from the conversations we have.
In this process, have you come across some books that you've liked that are very detailing in the millennial and where they are? There's some books that you've read that would be good for our viewers out here to say, hey, this might be a book that would...
I think the best way to think about the millennial generation, I haven't read many
Good books about it.
many
Yeah,
good
yeah.
books about it, just because I think it's such a new idea, like a new concept, because we really are the first generation that's ever been, I kind of want to say, overanalyzed.
Under a
compared to-
microscope.
Right,
Yeah,
like you look at us and we're the first generation that people constantly look to criticize or see where our flaws are. And so I think that in the next couple of years, you will see a lot of really good authors coming out with books describing
Maybe some other information, blogs, et cetera. that
Right.
would have
Yeah.
some of that.
I
All
think
right.
the best place is to start at the National Millennial Community website. I know that Bill Amata is really easy to talk to. He's the leader of our organizations or our cause, and so I think that if you have any questions, you can always ask him. You can ask me, and I can figure out anything. But the best bet would probably be to start at the National Millennial Community.
Great, Dalton. Glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Next time I'll let you wear the sport coat and I'll wear the
I
shirt.
will,
That
right.
way we'll feel we play the other side
Right.
of it. Hey, Dalton Steinert's been our guest here. Great guest and great subject. Hope you have a chance to follow up with the National Millennial Community and follow up on some of the ideas we've discussed here today. Thanks for watching the Forum here on Eagle Television. The Forum is brought to you by Hayes Med and by Eagle Communications, our community connected.
It's a beautiful day in our super high-speed internet great customer service neighborhood. Like you, this is where we live. In fact, our company is employee-owned, so it's our goal to improve the quality of life for everyone in our community by delivering faster, more reliable internet, clearer, more feature-laden phone service, quality TV channels, all with the level of customer service you'd expect from people who are your neighbors. Eagle Communications, our community connected.